produced, growth is being produced through the natural flow of events and people just getting together. Thank you. Thank you. Biblical counseling, where we have Kyle's wife has a degree in biblical counseling, and I think this is important because God has given gifts unto the body. I didn't realize how important biblical counseling was. And for you all who are planting a church, you may not even, you may not have one, a resident biblical counselor. But if you get some people who just have a gift of ministering to people with deep heart issues, deep issues of the past, then that's a blessing. Because biblical counseling, I think in urban context, is very necessary. And I didn't know the value of it until myself, my family, had to sit with a biblical counselor. And I went away just thanking God, weeping, because it was amazing the wisdom that God would give people just to deal with hard issues. And I know we as pastors, we think we sharp and we got the vision and we wise. But I'm telling you, man, it's some people that God has just gifted in that area of biblical counseling. So that's a formal thing that's going on. And then children's ministry, a formal thing that's going on. Children come and they gather when the adults gather and they getting it. But obviously, that ain't it. We don't have youth ministry, and that children's ministry should not be the end-all spiritual nourishment for that child. Everything we do in these areas, even if it's counseling, sitting with a couple, getting real biblical counseling, we say, understand that you are required, to much is given, much is required, to be able to minister to another couple. Love to see young couples, they going through it. But after God has strengthened you, what do, Peter? You go strengthen your brother. Everything, you let them know. I'm not even going to waste my time. If I'm going to disciple you, I don't care how. If you got to promise me. You got to sign a covenant almost that you are going to go and do the same. This is not about you getting what you need. It's about you being a conduit. You're going to get what you need, but you better give it to somebody else too. Amen. So, go ahead, bro. So the informal ministry, let's just go over these real quick. Informal, these are some of the things that should be going on in the lives. This is what I desire to see to go on in the lives of the people of our church. Self-ministry. Preaching the gospel to yourself. And I just wrote some real quick. Read at least one gospel book every year. There are enough good ones to last a lifetime. And it's true. It's enough bad ones too. But it's enough good ones to last a lifetime. But preaching the gospel to yourself. A guy named Joe Thorne has a good little Note to Self. That's a tight little book. But preach that gospel to yourself every day. I tell our church, I would just love to see the church just preaching the gospel to themselves every day. They challenge to do that. Become familiar with the gospel. This is informal. Ain't nobody coming to your house and peeking in the window. Just informal. Just do your thing. Please read or preach the gospel. Ministry to family. Devotions, Bible reading, family worship, discipling of children and spouse. This should be the cultural norm. Puritan days, right? Who reads some of them Puritans? Them dudes, man, will come to your Reformed pastor, Richard Baxter. He paying you a visit. Let your children say, now we ain't going to do that. Let your children say, Daddy ain't read the scriptures with me all week. Oh, you going under church discipline. We going to have to handle that. That's for real. That's how they did it. Now, we not saying that. It's extreme, but the reality is it should be the cultural norm where every man that comes into our ministry, one of our deacons, this brother was torturing his family. We wonder why they didn't, he said it ain't working, man. Well, what are you doing, bro? This bro had his family sitting for how long? About 2 hours. 2 hours. Listening to him go through. I'm like, man, are you crazy? But I commend you, but you crazy. but he took it to heart. He said, okay, this is what y'all gonna see. He wonder why them kids, teenage, looking crazy. My daughter look crazy after 30 minutes. Like, hold up. So, but devotion, Bible reading, family worship. This should be the cultural norm, y'all. Cultural norm. This should be happening in our homes, in our church, and we want that to happen. Go ahead, bro. One-on-one Bible reading. I love this, a little book called One-to-One. And this is what I love. I say, it ain't real deep. It ain't real deep. Just get with somebody and read the scriptures together. Just read a book of the Bible together. And I really love where, and we'll talk about that in friendship, but just reading the scriptures together. I love that little book. Sam Storm says this, the truth of God's written word is unparalleled in its capacity to change a human life. What ultimately accounts for the sort of transformation that we prize and that pleases God is the truth of the Scripture, inspired, illuminated, and applied to the human soul. It don't get no better than that. It don't get no better than to have a high view that the Scriptures will transform and change you. And of course, through the formal, we train people how to, read and study the Scriptures, but just to read it, God will work through you just to read it. I know they got all kind of hermeneutics and how to study the Bible for all it's worth. Those are good. But even if you don't, just get with your brother and sister and read the Scriptures together. Go ahead, bro. Relationship building, genuine friendships. And that's one thing that I thought when I became a Christian. I had so many friends. Well, not a lot, but we were so tight. We was tight, man. I took 2 bullets for friends. I couldn't imagine. I love how Paul say, make room in your hearts for us. We didn't make room in our hearts for no. We was friends for life. And if you died, wasn't no replacement. We were friends. And when I became a Christian, I could not think of what kind of friends am I going to have. That was one of the key things that kind of hindered me from like, man, I'm not going to have no friends. But by the grace of God, man, I got friends. Ore is way in Cali. I consider him a friend. He's a brother that I know I can call. It's amazing what God does. This is a side note. It's amazing how God brings you in the body and the people you meet. Not because you dope or you tight or because of music. I know people like I'm talking about just being nobody and just meeting people and they genuinely care about you. That's why I love the legacy, man. Lasting relationships. Befriend some people. Man, it's amazing, man. But we want people to develop genuine friendships, to develop friendships that encourage and challenge me to love God with all my heart, soul, strength, and mind. These are the kind of friendships I'm talking about. Because the kind of friendships I had encouraged me towards everything that was foul. But I want friendships that encourage me and challenge me to love God with all my heart, soul, and mind. That means playing and praying together. I'm one of the silly, and y'all have probably seen a little of that. We silly. This dude here is silly. Most of the church think he's serious, but he's silly, man. Sometimes I think, this is your week of silliness. He called me on April Fools. We got an office, man. This dude's talking about, man, the ministry over there it's burnt down. I'm like, what, man? What are you talking about? It ain't over. We gonna be cool. I'm thinking, nah, it's over, man. It's silly. That's borderline sinful. I ain't gonna tell you what I did.
Yeah, what'd you do?
Y'all won't tell.
Yeah.
Well, okay. I got my dad, and I ain't gonna tell you what I said to him. But I told y'all was gonna tell you. My daddy knows me, my past, right? And one of the things about me, one of the things about me is that I was very angry. I mean, I used to get mad. I was cool, but if you tripped, I was a pretty bad guy. I mean, I did some bad things. So my anger was always an issue. I've been cool, now. So I called my daddy. After he did that to me, I called my dad, and I'm like, Daddy, man, I got angry, man. I done beat somebody. The police finna come and get me the ministry over. He said, Kenny, what you do that for? I'm like, Daddy, wait a minute. Calm down. He loved the church. I saw my father 2 years ago come to faith in Christ. I done seen him wild out. I mean, heroin, everything. He's a Christian now. I mean, devotions and everything. And when I told him it's over, Daddy, ministry, I'm finna go to jail. He's like, oh, Kenny. I said, Daddy, no, I'm playing. Well, don't play like that. Don't play. I'm silly. So friendships were real, genuine, authentic friendships where you being open about your highs, lows, temptations, and joys. That's how you know you're breaking that barrier of real friendship, when you can share sin, highs and lows. Most of the time you meet somebody, we can talk about our highs. You know you got a friend where you can share with them your lows or your sin or even your past. And you know that they'll cover you, they'll protect you, they don't judge, but yet they'll minister to you, they'll challenge you. Developing a healthy, interdependent friendship that encourages and grows you spiritually. And I put on there read the same book. My daughter did my PowerPoint, she messed some stuff up. Developing a healthy, interdependent friendship. I said that. Developing, she did, because I'm technologically ignorant. All I know is the scriptures out there. Or it's technology. I got a Mac and everything, don't know how to use it. But developing a healthy, interdependent friendship that encourages and grows you spiritually. And I love reading books. The first thing I do with guys is is give them a book. And let's read this book together. That's how you can develop a friendship. Go ahead, bro. Hospitality. Oh, go ahead.
One thing I want to say about this last piece, though, is often a lot of times because of the way, you can blame it on Christian hip-hop, you can say whatever. A lot of times we have these relationships before we actually are affiliated with our churches, or we form these relationships with people we have commonality with outside of the church, and so those become our mini churches, those become the people who we do life with. And when it comes to our church, it's just a place we start to go to just on Sunday. We don't know anybody, we aren't intentional, but that's why the formal and the informal have to be together, because you have to be intentional. Like if your church, if you're a pastor and you are planting a church and you're creating these things, you need to give opportunities for people to connect, because that little 45 minutes after service is probably not going to happen. People are not probably going to sit together, pray together, talk about their sin, talk about their highs. That's not going to happen. Like you have to create formal structures in order to put people in an environment that will cause them to say, hey, we're here, let us eat a meal together. Somebody share something. Hopefully you're encouraging your leaders to be not only preaching these things, but doing these things, actively connecting with people throughout the church, inviting them over. But there's an intentionality that we have to have as leaders, and then hopefully as members, that you're looking, sitting in your church and saying, I'm not going to just try to find this outside of my church. Like I know I have in my mind enough friends, but I am intentionally going to try to engage people right where I'm at. So anyway,
that's dope, man. That's that scripture can make room in your heart, man. And I tell, when we started out as a church, we had about it's about 50 people. Or when we launched, we had about 30. Then quickly about 50 people. So, and it was so tight knit. You know what I mean? And I could sense. And obviously you're going to get comfortable around these people. We got community groups and, wasn't a lot of sporadic, it wasn't no great growth, so we was cool. And I was cool with that, and Kyle was cool. We was just really growing strong in relationship to each other. But I noticed our human sinful tendencies, if somebody comes in, there's a little apprehension. It's almost like we think that, those old traditional churches, like we can get like that. And I was like, look, we got to make room in our hearts. Let's bring them in just as if, because I know it gets so comfortable. That's human nature. We get comfortable with people, but if we don't have churches, if we on mission, and this all results to, it's one thing to be missional and say that I'm going out evangelizing and I love to evangelize, but this is the type of culture or community you want to bring them into. Because the gospel, it's beautiful. It is beautiful what Jesus says about the great commandment. Love the Lord thy God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. The reality of the gospel is just not a right relationship being made between you and God. That's first and foremost, and it is primary. But you now are being born into a family. People need to sense that. And that culture needs to be a family, because one of the things about us in this day, it ain't about us being hip. We've been through that phase, hip and cool. I may preach an ad, but that's not the emphasis. The emphasis is authenticity, being authentic. And people can sense that in the street if they can sense anything else, if you're being authentic or not. Go ahead.
What if your church does that kind of embrace that whole...
If
they see this sort of thing, they know it's right, but they see it as a threat, and then you get in trouble for doing this sort of thing. That's why it's like scary.
Well, that's why that piece, and this is important, and that's a good question, because as much as what you said earlier, I know that frustration. about wanting to be a catalyst and changing the culture of the church. But if it ain't happening from the top, it's likely not to happen. Okay. And you'll be frustrated. Now, I know they say some people, you stay there and help change the culture. But if there is no willingness, and if they're not hearing this, that's why this is what we preach. We're not preaching, but the scriptures are like that. You know, I was preaching every chance I get when I was preaching through the Gospel of John, chapter 11, and I'd never seen it before. Chapter 11, the raising of Lazarus, right? And this is what he says after Jesus. We know that Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead. He's the one that called him out. But he said to him, and this is John 11:43. When he said these things, he cried with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The man who had died came out, his hands and feet bound with linen stripes, and his face wrapped with a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." And I said, before I even looked at it, I said, this is a picture of the gospel. Here's a dead, we all were dead, Ephesians 2, dead in our trespasses and sin, dead. God, through the gospel, Jesus called us out. The beauty is when he called us out, we were what? We wasn't pristine and pretty. Yet while we were still sinners, God saved us. So, it's still going to need to be some work done. But I love how Jesus lets them participate in setting this man free. The initial birth came from Jesus, point blank. But he says his face, his hands and feet bound with linen strips and his face wrapped with a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." And I use that as a point to say this is how we have to be as far as the culture of this church. There are people who are going to come. Jesus is saving them. He's calling us to remove bandages, remove things that are hindering them. And that word "go," every time you get in the text and you hear that word "go," just attribute it to Matthew 28. I don't care if you have to eisegete a little bit. No, I'm not telling you to eisegete. But when you hear "let him go," that's the mission, right? But that's the sequence. He's come alive. He needs to be freed up some more. Go. Go. And I think that's a beautiful picture of the gospel. That's a beautiful picture of what I see what we want to do. So it's got to happen like that. So if you underneath trying to, and you be a Christian, you do all you're supposed to do, you got to make that decision if, that's the church you want to say. Because don't look at it, that may not be their thing.
I was just encouraged because we were just at a church that was kind of going through the same thing, and I went back about 3 years ago. I went back to my church on fire, and coming to a conference like this and meeting saints and rubbing shoulders was preparing me to move to go to the church that I'm at now to be ready for that ministry. So maybe this is the Lord just getting me prepared to transition. And it hurt. I never thought of it like that until one of my brothers, after being back at home, was like, "Maybe the Lord calling you to leave." So, that's just my thought. And it's a hard thing to swallow, but
I bet you it's been so many testimonies of people who came to the legacy and went home and said, "I just can't do it no more." But, and we try not, and I'm not one to say, just be careful with that. You know what I'm saying? Don't, because, just be careful. Don't just go, and up and just jump ship and leave your church and then sit in a year. You just disgruntled and hating the church and all that. Like I said, the church, that Augustine quote is nasty. Yeah. But it's your mother. That's nasty. Should I quote that one, Laura? You think? Be careful with it? Yeah. Okay. Laura, he's, well, Sally, Laura is a beast. I better come to this class. Come on. Beast in a good way, y'all know. Urban. Somebody says that you can't call a person a beast, you call him in your revelation. You don't mean that beast. So, hospitality. Spontaneously inviting people for meals, sharing your food, home, and resources. You want that to be the culture of your church. I remember I was like, man, we should, remember I said we need to have a day where people, we was going to change something that should be informal to something formal. We need to set a day where people invite other people. But that's, that's taking something that should be, You know, and you know, because people can, you know, everybody don't want. You gotta talk to, you know, people sometimes don't want stuff like that. But you gotta let it happen through God's word and by His Spirit. That we understand that as a Christian, these are exhortation that stem from the fact that your heart is changed. You're not no longer your own. You've been bought with a price. These are the mandates. These are the commands. These are things that your Lord requires of you. Now do it. And if you know, and you say it in a way that if they walk away feeling bad about not doing it. That's how you preach. Make them feel bad about it. And make them feel good that God's given them grace. Accountability. This is a huge piece because, and somebody said that's a part of their thing. Authentic self-revelation and confession, giving and receiving correction and input. Again, a cultural norm where there's pastors, we're not trying to be spying out people or calling, you know, FBI or what's private investigators watching people's lives. That ain't what it's about. There's not a culture of suspicion. When people talk about accountability, they think of a culture of suspicion. No, just accountability one to another. This is a part of that culture. This should be, you know, we am I my brother's keeper? You know, and I know Kyle is huge on that. Not even from the standpoint of just individuals, because that's huge, y'all. Again, we're talking about the product of somebody coming in who's become a Christian. They are going to have issues. They're going to be still caught up in webs of sin. Accountability helps that. Even from a couple standpoint, some accountability. Go ahead.
A piece of that, and really a piece of all these things, is that, and I'm speaking to pastors and lay members, these things have to be modeled out. Like if God has granted you the grace enough to be, to grow in the knowledge of these things. And in order for this to become a culture, one, the leaders have to be communicating it. The leaders have to be living it out. As they do it, hopefully the laymen in the church, you are called to shepherd one another. You're doing the same thing. Not only are you communicating these things, but you're living them out. So as new people come in, they see it. Because you can talk about it, you can teach it, but if people aren't living it out, intentionally living it out, then you're not going to be able to create the culture. And that's the responsibility not just of the pastor, not just of a deacon, not just of, you know, someone, a discipleship person, but this is the responsibility for every single believer who's within the church. That you have to live these things out. There's a responsibility for your fruitfulness of your own soul, that I need accountability, but also as I do it, it now has been modeled for someone who doesn't understand it, who's never, because I'm telling you, first time I heard of accountability, it blew my mind. I'm sitting in an accountability group and I'm hearing somebody talking about they're addicted to porn. I'm like, whoa. You know, like I'm thinking everybody's a Christian, nobody has any issues, like, but it rocked me to my core that, man, I can be vulnerable. Like I can, then this was a leader who was talking about it. He was talking about how he worked at Charter and he was in this room and every channel was there. And so he had to watch each channel to see which one was going to cut out. And so he had accountability because certain channels being in that room was an issue. And he was having accountability of the fact that he needed to get out of that job. That he needed to ask for a new position. And he was communicating this. And this was for me as a new believer, just like, man, like if he's communicating this, if he's being this transparent, then I can talk to them about this when I'm struggling with, and I can get help. And I never heard of people who are calling me and checking on me about these things. But if it's not being lived out, if you're not being intentional about these things, if it's just something on a legacy conference page or a PowerPoint, and these things aren't practically going on in your lives, then you're not going to create that culture. You're not going to see it. The new people who are coming into your churches, they're not going to have it.
Good. And mentoring, okay? These are things that should be cultural norms. This guy's just going to call you as a pastor that's going to want you to mentor them, disciple them. But it should be strong men in a church or strong couples or strong women that are able to do that. Mentoring, guidance and encouragement, modeling help in specific areas of life that one may be ignorant of. If you're talking about urban ministry, people have not seen healthy marriages. They don't know what, I mean, they probably, the only marriage they've seen, I mean, it probably has been a wreck for most of the people. I'm talking about what I've experienced. They need to be mentored. They want to get married. They're changing their life. Finances. How to be a good steward of money. We don't need to have a separate ministry called stewardship. I mean, we can preach on stewardship, and you can, but within the culture of the church, there should be some people getting with young couples saying, you know, we've learned over the years some things about finances that I think will be helpful for you. We don't have to institute a mandate where everybody go to a class. We shouldn't. Manhood, womanhood. These things are important. These things are things that, you know, not only the pastor is skilled in manhood. He's not the #1 Superman in the church. It's a guy who in our church, man, and we were sat down with him and talking, and he's a beast, man. He, you know, I'm like, man, I want you to, man, could you teach me some things, man? Go ahead. This is the last one. Evangelizing and witnessing, a cultural norm. This should be one of those informal. Remember, these are all informal things. We can change and make it formal, but these are things that I believe that through proclamation of the gospel, through modeling of these things, you can create this culture in your church of authenticity, where people understand that this is, as you grow in honoring the Lord, you become more, as 2 Timothy says, more useful to the master. You know what I'm saying? As he cleanses you, as he washes you, as you see the beauty of Jesus more, the desire of your heart is to become more useful. Now, as a pastor, we cannot lord over and be afraid to allow people, according to Ephesians, it says what? That we are to what? Equip the saints for the work of ministry. Equip them to do ministry. Ministry should be happening. It should be going on. And also evangelizing, sharing the good news of Jesus Christ at an appropriate time in an appropriate way. Intentionally engaging with believers.
Unbelievers, I'm sure.
Yeah,
maybe both.
Tina, your daughter is really bad. She tried. That's my wife. She's a little more gentle. Leaving others with the fragrance of Christ wherever you go. She was not. She stayed doing it. But this is important. So remember when I talked about in community group, like okay, we satisfy one day out of the month, we go out evangelize. That would be disappointing if that's all that our people shared about Christ, is that one day of the month. Again, everything we do, macro, everything we do, we saying this is just a model of. You get to see Kyle in action, giving the gospel, sharing the gospel. And you come behind and you build confidence, because preaching, that's the beauty about preaching doctrines of grace and encouraging people that God's Spirit, it ain't about who you are. It ain't about how gifted you are, how articulate you are. It's a beautiful thing when Christ is being uplifted and His Spirit has empowered all believers. You get some bold believers who will move on things, who get confidence, not in themselves, but in the God who saved them. And they'll begin to want to create this culture. And then they'll leave others with the fragrance of Christ wherever you go. Some questions?
Yeah, not to get too sidetracked, but when you talk about the appropriate time in an appropriate way, there's kind of like a feeling out there that like going out to evangelize is like less ideal than it was once thought of, and so I don't know, kind of get the.
It was a dude, man, who came to our church from Alabama. I don't know where he's from. No pun intended, but he was from an affluent place somewhere in the country, and he came to go to Covenant Seminary. He was coming to our church, and he had never seen city life. So we had talked about evangelism before this, right? And he was like, well, I don't really agree with going up to people sharing. the gospel. I don't agree with that. I'm like, oh, okay. He said, because, you know, I just believe you get to befriend somebody. And I understand friendship evangelism. I said, okay, well, cool. He said he wanted to hang out with me. So he came to hang out with me and go through the city. And I'm going to make the point about that. He came, and the first thing, we went by my grandmother's house, right? It's over on the north side. So pick him up, and he's staying with some people, I mean, in one of the richest neighborhoods in St. Louis. I go pick him up almost to a mansion. So this dude has money. So I pick him up, me and him ride. I take him to the hood. First by my grandmother's house, and I see my cousin on the porch. Next thing I know, we getting out my car, and here come a truck being chased by another truck coming down the street, and he get back in the car, and the truck, one of the trucks swerved and boom, hit a lamppost, the whole lamppost, and the top of the lamppost just fell down on top of my car, boom, and I'm like, man, and dude get out the car, I tore up my car. And I'm like, dude, he had his girl, a baby in the car. He talking about, I tore up my car. I'm like, dude, hold up, calm down. You know, your girl is all right, your baby. I just got that car. Them dudes tripping. I'm like, okay, so that's a sidetrack. But check this out. I said, man, look, when you grow up where I grew up from, there's an urgency. I share the gospel whenever the appropriate, when it's right. I will get up. I love St. Louis. If you ever come, we got we got fried rice, Chinese spots. And I go into the Chinaman. And that's what we call it. I'm sorry. But that's what we call it. No offense. But I go up in there and I just love to share the gospel on point. Because you're going to wait about 5 minutes for your rice. Share the gospel. In White Castle, share the gospel. And after that, I said, you see, this is why we share the gospel. And there is no, sometimes I can befriend you and wait, but I've had friends that I've seen them 1 week. I remember telling one of my best friends, after I became a Christian, giving him the gospel. I'm like, man, he was like, is it going to take all that? I'm like, yeah, it's going to take all that, bro. You on heroin? You looking nasty? Like, is it going to take? It's going to take the gospel. A week later, I got a phone call. He was dead. See, when you live in this, and that's a culture difference. And I'm not mad at him for saying, okay, sharing the gospel, spontaneous, running up on. Is that what you're talking about?
No, exactly. And that's kind of the frustration I feel with sometimes hearing about, like, you have to have a relationship with someone before you can share the gospel, or you have to be. Yeah, exactly. I'm like, you don't know if they're going to be around tomorrow to tell them.
Yeah,
that's true.
Again, not to go story heavy. Half the people that come to our church, probably over half the people who come to our church, informally witness to people at their jobs and their friends. Most people who end up coming to be members, we get few people out of the community. The majority of the people are just our own people, the own rhythms of their lives. God has given them grace in their jobs, their schools, and different ones. They communicate the gospel, people are converted, and they come to the church. So yes, I agree that you should, wherever God has given you grace and relationship, you should be giving the gospel to those people. One of the toughest ways to do it is probably to your own family. But going out and being intentional and walking up to strangers, I think you can't eliminate that. Give an example. Many of y'all know Thizzle, Travis, right? Yeah. So, I don't know if you've ever heard his testimony, but Travis was out on the block in the midst of his sin, selling drugs, getting high, all those things. Thizzle, I'm sorry. Mark Flame's church was having a outreach day where they went out in the community and was giving the gospel. And so you had this church with, the majority of them were Caucasian. They had button-up flannels type deals, and they're going out in the middle of the hood, and Flame's like the only black guy. And so they were engaging and talking to people, giving the gospel, and they came across Thizzle. Because when those people come in the neighborhood, regardless if you think they're paying attention or not, they're paying attention. They see you coming from a mile away. And so they're like, what is going on? So Thizzle walks up trying to figure out, like, what are these people doing in our neighborhood? And he's listening, and for whatever reason, the guy said, does any of you guys rap? And so Thizzle was like, I rap. And so he's like, oh, we got a friend who raps. And so he went to get Flame. Flame comes up. Flame raps. And so Thiz was like, oh man, you know, he talking about the Lord. I don't talk like that, but you know, I rap too. So Flame was like, well, let's rap. I'll listen to you. And you know, obviously Thiz was like, I really don't want to rap for you because I'm gonna be cussing and talking about drugs. He's like, man, just rap. So he rapped, and he was like, here, man, take my number. Here, take my number. And he sat there and gave him the gospel, told him about the Lord, told him about Jesus. And yeah, he gave him his number to give an opportunity for relationship, but he sat there and gave him the gospel, and this was led to the Lord. Now, had he not went out there, had they not had some formal structure to go out there and do that, then, you know, are we to say that God wouldn't have sent somebody else and Thizzle wouldn't have been saved? No, I'm not saying that. But there's a value. Especially people in the hood. Like, go out there, communicate your heart, communicate all that God has given you, and you have to let, ultimately salvation is going to rest in the hands of the Lord, but we're called to be obedient.
Definitely. I mean, there's so many commands in Scripture for us as believers to share the gospel.
Are we in Q&A? Sorry.
Yeah, you can ask any questions, and then when we're done, we can go.
A quick comment about that is I feel like in an urban setting, in the hood, more people are outside.
Absolutely.
And I'm excited about that because it lends itself to that kind of walking up and having a conversation.
Yeah.
And the friendship thing probably grew up in more of a neighborhood where people don't come outside.
Yeah, absolutely.
But my question is, when do you see...
It is real, man. Go ahead.
When do you see, I guess, pragmatically looking at the numbers as your church grows? You talked about at 50 and you have more community. And I've experienced that in a church of 70. I'm in a residency at a church of 250 to 300. Mm-hmm. And everything informal has become drastically formal. Mm-hmm. How do you see either A, how to keep that from happening, or B, when do you start saying we're too big of a church for us to continue to be informal, and so we need to start multiplying and really keeping this thing going?
Yeah, man, a great question, and we not there yet. Really, to be honest, I mean we at about 80, 100 maybe, and that's really that containable size, and you hear that because it's a well-known church in our city that has blew up, and they've had that, and really I think it was a little bit of a difference because we can talk about different forms of ministry and what's the aim going out. But I think if anybody can help answer that question, that would be good, helpful, you know what I mean? But, you know, that's just the heart. That's the desire to make sure that no matter what, and to continue to have the same basic philosophy of ministry, because that's what we're really talking about here, is a philosophy of ministry. You know, some people have a philosophy of ministry where it's attraction. That everything, that all the formal things, and this is a church that I knew, all the formal things are run with pristine accuracy. But as you go in and get funneled in, you realize that it's missing the, you know, the formal relation. You thinking you're blown away. I mean, lights, camera, action, everything, we're preaching, down to the cue, everything. And I'm not knocking that, because we want everything to be right too, everything unto the glorification of Jesus. But it's a philosophy of ministry, man, and as it happens, as God, you know, through His Spirit, if He gives increase, obviously, in that philosophy of ministry is that we want to plant more church. We're not trying to be a mega church. We're not trying to get, not that, you know, you can't determine that. I mean, I'm open to whatever, 5,000, you know what I mean? I sprinkle them, send them your way. But the reality is that philosophy won't change.
But are churches to be, is that what a church is supposed to do? Is it supposed to like give birth and multiply to another church? Like,
I believe so, yeah.
So if a church is not doing that, I mean, they've been around for like 100 years and, I mean, it's still 30 people. I mean, like.
Still 30 people?
No, not where I'm at. But
well, no, I'm not saying your fault. I know you're mad. I'm at 30. But, you know, if it's not, again, bro, I want us to be careful, okay? As we go and set out to plant churches, it's something to see some of the things that have been done wrong, but don't let that be the fuel for fire. Let's not spew venom on churches and so forth and how they've been doing things. Some of them, you know, a lot of the churches, man, I was with a church and the man was just a wonderful man, you know, and he taught me a lot about just how to love my wife and family. just never was exposed to this. It's amazing to me, y'all, that we live in 2013, and it seems to me, I don't know, that the Lord is doing something in the hearts of his people. I talk to dudes, and we sound the same. We're not the most talented, we're not the most gifted, but God is putting people together to form authentic communities. Now, we want to do what we do based off of our love and desire to want to please the Lord and to see his fame spread in our cities. And other churches that haven't done, you know, I love what Timothy, I believe it's, I don't know what, it's in Timothy somewhere where it says each man's work will be judged, whether it was wood, hay, or stubble, or whether it comes off as fine gold or silver or whatever. We just need to make sure that we're doing everything that we need to do. So having an opinion about, obviously we have opinions about some churches that are preaching heresy. Paul would call churches out. One of the things that's at our church that happens is we get a lot of people that come from other churches. Now, I said in the beginning, and I know some people say, I don't want nobody from other churches. We want all unbelievers, new converts. I want both in, because some of them churches, them people need to get out of us. They're not preaching the gospel. They're not churches. Anybody, this is the only occupation in the world, the most important and eternal. Anybody can stand up and stamp a sign on the building and say, let's have church. If you in something like that, and when they come and they hear the gospel, see authenticity, yeah, they going and I welcome you. But if you go to a church and you think we just a little more hipper and, you know, and you got a cool pattern, no, we'll pump your brakes. This ain't about hip or cool. It's about, you know, doing the work of the Lord.
Hold on a second, wait. I wanted to say something about brother in the back. I think what we communicated today, I think will work in any church no matter how big it grows. If you are raising up other leaders who will communicate the same thing that started with the 20 and the 30 and the 50. The problem is that you start to get these churches. I have relationships with churches that have blown up. You have these churches that have blown up, but they learn later that, man, I should have trained more people to handle the growth so that they can create almost small pockets of communities within the church. Because you can have a church of 1,000 and still feel connected with 20 or 30 people, because you're not going to know everybody. Everybody's not going to have 40 relationships within the church. And they have that leader who they can go to. You know, they have the elder, you know, if you have a plurality of elders that you can go to. And so it creates that, even though it's a large church, I still get all the means of grace that God desires for me in my local church, even though it's large. So I think you have to pour it into your leaders and raise up other leaders.
Real good.
Yeah, just what you had said, one of the churches that we have grown to now is just like that. They grew so huge in the last 5 to 6 years, they spread to like 6 campuses. They understood the importance of developing leaders and making sure that they had a place within the church where they can get them biblically sound first, and then test them with making sure they're accountable in leadership in smaller places, and then as they grew, the people grew with it, and the Lord is really blessing them. So,
I'm real big on church operation. Like, I think you should be drastic. If you have a church that's not there and you're a leader and you're just like, man, we've grown and we didn't realize this, and I think you should shut anything that is causing you where your leaders are tied up doing other things. I think you should shut it down for a while so that you can spend time with your leaders, training them up to be able to handle the things that you want to see within your church. So if that means some things have suffered, they have to suffer.
That's the thing. You first. Who was first? Because I don't want to offend nobody.
Go ahead.
I'm tracking with you with that formal and informal thing. The thing that, as I'm listening to you, and even in my setting as well, I wrestle with how much of the formal church schedule gets in there where there's no informal time, whether that's for me and my family to do the informal or my church leaders. How do you guys work that balance?
That's good. That's important, and I'm glad you said that, because I have to spend a portion of time with the sermon. I'm doing 2 community groups, which are formal, counseling, and you're right. I don't hate that, but I'm a people person. I love being around unbelievers. I stop and see a group of dudes at the park and get out and start just chopping it up. But you're right, that modeling that's why, obviously you're preaching that and you try to model it as much as possible. But, I am somewhat the one who was equipping, and I have my biblical responsibilities. You know what I mean? So that's where, in my mind, sometimes you can have that tension where, man, this formal stuff, let's just be informal and I'll go be informal with it. No, I have a biblical mandate called as a pastor to do certain things that will prevent me from actually just, you know, being all over the map with this stuff. Case in point, you know, doing the discipleship, the one-on-ones, because that's why it has to be a culture in the church, man. People want to do, you know, they see you preaching, they see you teaching and stuff, and they want you to be the one to disciple them, you to be the one to mentor, you the one who got the answers, but it's just not so, man. So that's a tension, you know, because there's a desire, but hey, you know, I don't know if you got something.
I was going to say, be intentional about being informal. Block off a portion of your schedule, and you have to protect it. You can't be apologetic about it.
How's that work in terms of the church as a whole? There's the personal side as a pastor, leader. Then there's the church, the schedule of the church, where you don't feel the schedule of the church where people say Monday through Sunday I'm at church, doing the formal. Where's my time to engage community-wise?
Yeah, we're really...
Oh, so you're saying where it's actually...
You're saying where they have so much going on at the church that there's not really a lot of time outside of the
formal.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that balance. Because you got, you know, like discipleship groups, your men's stuff, your women's stuff, all those
we're
things.
We're very conscientious of how often our leaders are outside their homes. So you have to put a lot of stuff on the same day. I mean, we load Sundays up. So that we only have like 2 days. We normally don't want our leaders outside of the house more than 2 days. Like you start running to 3 and 4, then I mean they're going to be. I mean we're taking care of a family and kids, and it's just going to be extremely difficult. And use your singles.
Our service started at 1:30. Discipleship is at 12.
Yeah.
Service at 1:30.
Counseling is
out
after.
by 3.
New members is
new members, then counseling.
All Saturday.
And we do all that on Sunday. And then that one day, you know, Redeemed and Reloaded, the women get together, but on Mondays. But that's why I said, you know, it's important that you got to have those formal because they are the platform for teaching and instruct. Because you want to send healthy people out, so you got to have some. So it's both and. But I'm still saying that informal at some point should trump, not in position or you know what I mean as far as exaltation, but there should be more informal happening in some ways.
You know, I think
We didn't have to interview, bro.
my bad.
That was my question anyway. You already.
Oh,